Alrighty, so another weekend is upon us, which means it's time to do the preview in terms of the 11 games that is going to be happening on Saturday. And, there's 13 games that's happening this weekend, but tomorrow I will be doing the preview of the two games that is going to be happening on Sunday. But in terms of this week, as we are now, I think, 3 weeks away from decision day, and pretty much now all of these games, well, actually not 3 weeks before decision day. I think it's only 1.5 week before decision day because it's the first week of November. But for a lot of these teams, there's only like 3 more games for most of these teams that are going to be playing before decision day. There's 3 teams that is going to have 4 more games because they did not play in the midweek action. And there's no doubt that as we get to this time of period, this is usually kind of the most exciting period because you got teams that is either fighting for playoff seeding, or in the case of the Western Conference, you have 2 teams that is fighting for the top spot. And then you also have a lot of playoff six-pointer that is going on right now. And speaking of which, talking about the battle of the Western Conference title, the first game of the 11 game action on Saturday is exactly that, as the top 2 team in the Western Conference will meet one last time, and that of course is the Sounders and Sporting KC, which this game will start at 3:30 p.m. Eastern, 12:30 p.m. Pacific. And unfortunately, when the game starts at this time of the period, yeah, it means it's going to be on a Twitter stream. And yeah, I mean, I'm kind of surprised the fact that this is on a Twitter stream. I mean, I'm not saying that it's a bad thing or anything, other than the fact that you do know that I do not like Twitter stream whatsoever. But for kind of a big game like this, especially for the battle for the Western Conference title, I would think this would be on the other national television network, that is ESPN or ESPN2, or even on FS1 or on the big Fox network. But no, this one is going to be on Twitter. And coming into this game, the Sounders, of course, are currently at the top of the Western Conference with a 17-7-6 record, while Sporting KC, they, of course, are one of the 3 teams that did not play midweek, so they actually have a game in hand over the Sounders. And I think the gap between both of these teams are either at 4 points or 5 points. But either way, whoever wins this game will definitely have a big edge in terms of, for the Sounders, they do win this one, they are pretty close in terms of wrapping up the top spot for the Western Conference. But if Sporting KC can win, then yeah, maybe there's still a chance that they can not only close on the gap on the Sounders, but with that game in hand, if they do win that game in hand, they can take sole position of first place. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how this game is going to turn out. Remember last time when Sporting KC played against the Seattle Sounders, Sporting KC was able to get a win, and not to mention the fact that the Sounders did play a midweek game on the road. It wasn't really a far road trip. They were only going to Colorado, but still, rest is going to be in favor of Sporting KC coming in this game, and we'll see whether or not if that could be a factor coming into this top of the table Western Conference match. And also, not to mention, this is an early kickoff, and I know a lot of Sounders fans are going to be not happy the fact that they just play in the evening time on Wednesday, and they have a quick turnaround and are playing at home in an early kickoff on Saturday afternoon. But moving on, in terms of the next match, it's going to be Columbus versus the New York Redbulls. So this is a matchup that no doubt is a playoff six-pointer, and we're going to get a lot of playoff six-pointer from both of the conference. In fact, as I mentioned earlier, there's really no bad games in terms of this weekend's action. I think there's only like one game that is between 2 teams that is already eliminated, but even then, that game has some significant, as I'll talk about a little bit later. But the same goes with this one, because these are the 2 teams that is currently outside of the playoff picture, but these are also 2 teams that are kind of are 2 teams that is fighting to try to get themselves above the red line. For the Crew, they have a record of 10-8-12, while the Red Bulls have a record of 11-7-11. This game will start at 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific. Columbus, of course, drew 1-1 away against Nashville, while the Red Bulls was one of those 3 teams that did not play in the middle of the week. In fact, the Red Bulls are still above Columbus in terms of the standings right now, and I think they're still only just 1 point below the red line right now, whereas for Columbus, they are, I believe, 3 points below the red line right now. So in terms of a game where who needs to win the most to try to maybe get themselves in a good spot to get above the red line. There's no doubt that Columbus is going to be that team, but if the Red Bulls can win, and depending on how other resort goes, they could find themselves to be above the red line. And with the way that they've been playing in these last couple of games, where they have just been red hot lately, one of the hottest team right now in the league, I won't be surprised if the Red Bulls can come into Lower.com field and pretty much cause an upset. But that being said, Columbus has definitely played much better, and especially at home, they're starting to make Lower.com field kind of a little bit of a fortress, which, in some way we kind of expected this, where, when a new team play in a new stadium, it's kind of unfamiliar territory for them, but once they got used to it, and once they feel like they're playing at home, we're now seeing Columbus start to have that good home form that was really the biggest reason why they were able to get play off home field advantage in that MLS Cup. And keep in mind, all the games that they play in the playoffs was a home game that leads them to winning the MLS Cup last season. But now moving on in terms of the next match. So from a playoff six-pointer to the Eastern Conference to another big playoff six-pointer, and this I think is truly a playoff six-pointer, because this is actually between two teams that, with one of them is currently the last team in if the playoffs started today, and then one team that is going to be the first team out and unfortunately just staring below the red line. And in this case, for NYCFC, they're the team that is currently in 8th place and the first team out, whereas for DC United, they are the first team, or they're the last team that goes into the playoffs if the playoffs started today, as DC of course have a 12-5-13 record, while NYCFC have an 11-8-11 record. Both of these teams also are actually tied on points, but the reason why DC is above NYCFC is not just the goal differential, but because DC United has more wins. And gotta remember, wins is the first tiebreaker in MLS and not goal differential. This game will start at 7:30 p.m. Eastern, 4:30 p.m. Pacific to kick off a busy night. Where I think there's actually only 3 games that's going to kick off at that time, but there's also a lot of games that is going to be kicking off around that time too. And usually this is where we talk about the meat of the MLS action, where a lot of games usually kicked off around this time. But for NYCFC, well, they're coming into this playoff six-pointer definitely not in good form whatsoever, and they find themselves below the red line is because they have just been ice cold in this last 6 games, winless in the last 6 games, and have had some issue. Well, not just have some issue, but have big issue in terms of scoring. Like, they only finally ended the drought where they went over 400 minutes without a goal in the last game, getting a 1-1 draw against Atlanta United. While for DC, they put up a spirited effort against the top team in the East and the best team in the league, but unfortunately it still doesn't result anything, and they lost 3-2 in that game at home. And yeah, they're looking to try to bounce back in this game, but there's no doubt for NYCFC, which, by the way, this game I believe it's going to be taking place at Yankee Stadium, unlike last time when the first time both of these teams met, it was at Red Bull Arena. So that's maybe some good news for NYCFC fans, because it seems like they do much better when they're playing at Yankee Stadium compared to playing at their rival stadium, which shouldn't be a big surprise whatsoever. So yeah, let's see if they can maybe get a win in this and finally end this free fall that they're going for right now, because who would have thought that this would be a team that is fighting for playoffs, considered just a month ago they were sitting very comfortable in the Eastern Conference. But this just shows you that it doesn't take much to basically get yourself being in a comfortable position in the Eastern Conference to now finding yourself outside the playoff picture in quick succession, because like I said many times before, the East is very tight, and there still seems to be a logjam right now when you look at the standing in the Eastern Conference. But now moving on, in terms of the next match, is going to be the Philly Union versus Nashville SC. So this is a game that I mentioned before. It's the battle for second position in the Eastern Conference, with the Union currently have a 2 points, or I think, is it 2 or 3 points? I think it's a 3-point deficit that they have against Nashville, and have a record, or actually, yeah, it's a 3-point deficit. I look at the wins total, and I thought myself, wait, why is it the Union actually in 3rd place? Oh, I forgot the fact that Nashville, of course, are the draw kings of MLS, and they currently have a record 11-16-3, while Philly has a 12-10-8 record. This game will start at 7:30 p.m. Eastern, 4:30 p.m. Pacific. The Union, of course, they're looking to try to bounce back after a really tough loss that they suffered against Minnesota on the road 3-2. While for Nashville, they're also still looking to bounce back too and finally get a win too, because they have drawn 5 straight games coming into this one, and they're actually just 2 draws away from tying the Chicago Fire record for the most draw in a single season. And that record, I did eventually search that record to see who, of course, actually has the most draw in MLS. And to my biggest surprise, I know the Chicago Fire has it, but it was actually not that long ago. Like, it was 2014 that they actually had a club record 18 draw, and that Fire team also did not make it to the playoffs because they also lost like 10 games that season and only won 6 games that year to finish near the bottom of the table. But the good thing about Nashville is that even though they're the draw kings of MLS, at least they're also winning enough games, and as I mentioned before, they are a team that still has the fewest loss this season in MLS. But that being said, coming into this game, for Nashville, they're definitely going to be up against it because I mentioned in the review of how they are not going to have their top goal scored and probably their best player in this game, that is Hani Mukhtar, suspended because of yellow card accumulation. And they're playing against a Union team that, yes, even though they're going to have a bit of a short rest, they're going to be confident coming back at home, which is a place that they started to do well once again, and they're definitely looking to try to get a win where they would I believe tie Nashville for that second position, but they do own the tiebreaker because they will have 2 more wins than what Nashville has. And again, this is the issue with Nashville, where I said draws, as good as they are not losing game, but they also are not winning games. And at the end of the day, the tiebreaker is going to really hurt Nashville because of how many draws they have had this season compared to wins that they actually had, which is not that bad. I mean, 11 wins is still a lot in MLS, but it's definitely not if you want to consider a team that is near the top part of the Eastern Conference. But now moving on, in terms of the next match, is going to be the Canadian Classic between Toronto versus Montreal. And yes, we do get some late season rivalry game, and I believe this is going to be the 3rd and final Canadian Classic between both of these teams. But this is kind of a matchup between one team that is pretty much out of the playoff contention, that is Toronto FC, and they're trying to play spoiler against their hated rival Montreal that is in the midst of the playoff race in the Eastern Conference. Montreal currently in 6th position and 2 points above the red line and has a record of 11, 9, and 10, while Toronto has a record of 6, 7, and 17. This game will start at 7:30 p.m. Eastern, 4:30 p.m. Pacific, and this is, of course, the 53rd meeting between both of these teams in the Canadian Classic, with Toronto leading the series at 26 wins, 10 draw, and 16 losses. Last 5 head-to-head in this Canadian Classic, it was Montreal winning 3-1 against Toronto before Montreal winning 4-2 against Toronto, and then before that it was TFC winning 2-1 against Montreal. Then Montreal, of course, won 1-0 against TFC, and that was a game when TFC actually had an 18-game unbeaten run coming into that one, and Montreal basically snapped that streak out. But before that, it was TFC winning 1-0 against Montreal on the road. So, Montreal, they're definitely looking to go for the sweep in the Canadian Classic, which, by the way, I don't recall when was the last time that of course, happened, that one of these teams would sweep the series, especially in kind of like a season where both of these teams meet 3 times against each other. But there's a good opportunity that Montreal can do so in this game. But they're gonna do it. They're gonna have to go on road against the TFC side that they're gonna be up for this game. I mean, they might be eliminated right now, but the one thing they definitely wants to do is spoil their most hated rival chances of making the playoffs, and that this TFC team will be up for it, and they'll play their hardest to try to again trying to maybe slow down Montreal in terms of their hope to make the playoffs this season. But now moving on into the last game on this board before I switch boards and look at the last 5 games of the Saturday action, is the Chicago Fire versus RSL. So this is going to be the only interconference matchup of this week, as this game will start at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. The Fire, of course, they had that dramatic 4-3 win against FC Cincinnati, though it didn't really do them anything because they're already eliminated and they have a record of 8-7-16. Whereas for RSL, they of course find themselves below the red line once again because they were actually one of the 3 teams that did not play in the middle of the week, and because I talk about how pretty much every single team that is near the playoff line in the Western Conference have won. That's why RSL unfortunately has the unfortunate honor to drop all the way below the red line right now. But they do have an opportunity to get themselves back above the red line and also have that game in hand with a win against the Fire. But knowing the fact that this season RSL has not done very well on the road, it's not going to be easy because this Fire team, when you look at how they've been playing, it seems like they're not giving up yet. Like they know they have eliminated, but there's a lot of guys that are kind of doing what I expect a lot of these a team that have been eliminated have already. They haven't even thought about the golf courses yet, and instead still fighting and trying to fight for their jobs heading into next year. So yeah, this is not going to be a cakewalk for RSL, and I expect the Fire could maybe get play hard against RSL and maybe even spoil their chances of potentially making the playoffs. I mean, right now it's pretty obvious that there's a lot of teams that is going to be a Fire fan. In fact, pretty much almost all those teams that is like in the playoff picture, that is LAFC, Minnesota, and the Galaxy, and all those teams are just basically hoping that Chicago can win so that they can do them a favor and that RSL not only stay below the red line, but if those other teams also win, it can open themselves a gap. And even with that game in hand that RSL had, RSL probably would not catch them if they do not win this game. But that being said, I am now going to switch board and look at the last 5 games that's going to be happening in the Saturday night action. Alright, so moving on into the next game is Inter Miami versus FC Cincinnati, and just a disclaimer, I'm actually not going to be going to this game, and there's actually 2 reasons why I'm not going to this game. Well, actually 3 reasons I'm not going to this game. One of the reasons is that out of all 11 games that's going to be happening on Saturday, this one is probably the most meaningless one, and that's not saying that Inter Miami has been eliminated yet, but, knowing the fact that they still have a 6-point gap to make, and, they pretty much will have to win out for the rest of the season if they have any chances of making the playoffs, and also rely on a lot of help. It seems like their playoff hope is pretty much on life support again, and this is another game where they're playing against a team that is on bound to potentially win the Wooden Spoon and make history of winning the Wooden Spoon for the 3rd year in a row. That is FC Cincinnati, that has a record of 4-8-18, and Miami has a record of 10-5-15. But the second reason, besides the fact that it's kind of a meaningless game, is that I also had other plans on Saturday that I already planned that was conflicted in terms of when this game is happening. And of course, the third reason why I'm not going to be going to this game is that I did check the weather tomorrow at Fort Lauderdale, and yeah, there is definitely a threat that there could be not only rain that is going to be happening in the stadium, but also there could be thunder that could be happening during this game. In fact, about an hour before I did this preview, there was actually a thunderstorm that was going on, and that's the reason why I actually decided not to do the preview like this early in the morning, because if I do the preview while there's like a thunder in the background, you guys can probably hear it and think, what in the world is that sound? That's a thunderstorm, and since we're here in Florida, that is something you of course are kind of maybe accustomed to. I mean, I'm pretty sure if you live in Florida, you know what I'm talking about, or anywhere that has like a thunderstorm that is not like where I live in California. You know what I'm talking about. But going back to this game of course will start at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific, and again I didn't put the actual kickoff time because I don't have enough room to do so on this mini board. But for Miami, as I said, they finally ended the 6-game losing streak by winning 3-0 against Toronto and keep their fringe playoff hope alive. While for Cincinnati, their playoff hope was long gone before, and they have now lost 8 in a row, and they're getting close to matching what the Quakes did back in 2018, which is a team that only won 4 games in the entire part of the season. And as I said before, that I feel bad for Cincinnati, but I almost shared the same pain that they go through, and it seems like it's getting true because I remember that 2018 San Jose Earthquake season, and yeah, I think I'll just leave it at that because that was just not fun to watch them play every single game and basically uh, almost like an automatic L every time they play. But yeah, for this game, for Miami, like I said, they need to win this if they want to keep their fringe playoff home. The gap between them and the last team that's above the red line, that is DC, is at 6 points, and again they need a lot of help, and kind of almost similar to the help that they got in terms of the fact that they were one of the rare Eastern Conference teams that were able to get a win in terms of the midweek action. I talked about how pretty much almost every single Eastern Conference team besides New England have lost during the midweek action, and the fact that Miami was able to get a win, they get a little bit closer in terms of potentially getting back to the playoff race, even though technically you could say that maybe they're kind of out of it with the way that there's not a lot of games left this season. Now, moving on in terms of the next game, and that, of course, is LAFC versus Minnesota United. So both of these teams are coming off of a midweek that is kind of very similar result with the way that not only both teams won 3-2 during the midweek action, but they kind of won it by very similar fashion. The Loons, they were down 2-1 against the Union at one point, able to score 2 goals to win 3-2, and also had to endure 12 minutes where they were down a man. Whereas for LAFC, they were also finding themselves 2-1 down against FC Dallas, and in fact, I think FC Dallas actually scored the opening goal, so they were really down for the entire game until Chicho Arango basically scored the third and hit his hat trick to give the wins for LAFC. But coming into this game, it's another game where you could say that it's a playoff 6-pointer with LAFC still below the red line, and I believe they're either 3 or 4 points below the red line right now, sitting in ninth position, and have a record of 11-7-12, while Minnesota has a record of 12-8-10. And the start of this game will be 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific, and yeah, this is a game that both of these teams will want to win. Certainly for the Loons, hopefully, I know they got a big win against the Union, and it's easy for them to celebrate of such a resilient performance that they had. But as what Adrian Heath said at the post-game talk, they need to go at it again during the weekend's action, and that's kind of true because it's a great victory against one of the best team in the league, but now you have to play another team that is literally in hot pursuit to try to take those playoff spots in the Western Conference, and this is a game where for Minnesota they need to get a win if they want to get closer to not only clinch for their playoff position, but also maybe still have a small hope that they can get that home field advantage. Because moving on in terms of the next game between the Colorado Rapids and the Portland Timbers, and I mentioned in the review last time, the Timbers are opening the door in terms of that fourth position. I mean, a couple of weeks ago, how hot the Timbers was, it looked like they were just going to run away with that fourth position, and it's just going to be battle for all those teams between 5th through 10th place in the Western Conference for those playoff spots. But because of the fact that the Timbers have lost back-to-back games, they have now opened the door for teams behind them to maybe get that elusive fourth position that is the last position to host at least one playoff game this season. Now, it's not going to be easy to snap their 2-game losing streak there because they're about to play against a Rapids team that is still looking for that decisive victory, and they have good chance to do so as they come into this game with a 14-10-6 record. This game will start at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. Last game that Colorado has was against another Cascadia team, that is the Seattle Sounders, where they had a chance to get that big win that they've been looking for all season long, but they drew 1-1 against Seattle. Whereas for the Timbers, they of course lost 3-2 against the Whitecaps in a game that, they're definitely going to look back at that game and think that they should have won it, especially with the way that they were up 2-0 at home. And this season the Timbers was definitely not repeat the same fate as they were last season, where it's always been a team that always find ways to lose game because they can't close out one. This season they have done a much better job, but that last game was kind of almost a flashback to last season, where not only they didn't close out game, but they blew a 2-0 lead in that one and just allow Vancouver to kind of come back into this game and ultimately getting all 3 points. So yeah, it's a big game for both of these teams for different reason. And for the Rapids, because of the fact that the Timbers have also lost a couple of games in a row, and that before I said that maybe the Timbers had a chance to catch Colorado, it seems like that's not going to be the case because there's a 6-point gap between both of these teams. Although I will say that the Rapids, they still have a chance to maybe catch a Sporting KC for that second spot because technically they are tied with Sporting KC in terms of the points total. Now, that being said, I think SKC does have a game in hand, but if the Seattle does win and Colorado get a win in this game against the Timbers, they will leapfrog Sporting KC for that second position. And even though that second position doesn't really mean that much because you still have to play a home game in the first round and only the top spot gets a bye in the first round, who knows? Maybe if the top team does fall and if you get in the second position, you're next in line to potentially host all the games up until MLS Cup. And even in MLS Cup, if maybe at the top team in the Eastern Conference, or maybe even the second place team in the Eastern Conference fall, then they're next in line in terms of hosting MLS Cup. So even though that second position might not seem so long, it could be in terms of who to determine who exactly could potentially host the MLS Cup, or even home field advantage throughout the playoffs. But now moving on in terms of the next match, and that of course is the LA Galaxy take on FC Dallas. So for the second consecutive week, the Galaxy are playing another Texas team, and this time against FC Dallas. And you know how I said before, they're about to go through a gauntlet after they play against the Dynamo? Well, what I mean is they're about to go through a gauntlet after this game, because I forgot that they also play Dallas in this one. But then after that, they have a gauntlet where they're going to be playing the likes of Sporting KC and Seattle, and then of course finish the season at home against Minnesota. But this game will start at 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific. The Galaxy have a 13-6-11 record, while Dallas has a 6-10-14 record. The Galaxy, of course, were able to win 3-0 against one of their biggest nemesis, the Houston Dynamo, away. While Dallas, they're winless in the last 8 games, and they seems like they're unfortunately that kind of team that pretty much just checked out and realized that they're already looking forward to the off season rather than maybe for these players to fight for their jobs and hope that next season they'll still be there. I mean, if there's one player that I know for sure is still not going to be there next season, is Ricardo Pepi, who even said before that he almost is demanding a trade away from FC Dallas and want to make the jump to Europe, and I don't blame him. I mean, he is literally the best player on that team, and he is the guy that I've mentioned many times. He's going to be the next big American that's going to get that big money move off to Europe, and it's going to be interesting to see the offer that he's going to get for those European team. I mean, there's a lot of teams in Europe that is linked to trying to get Ricardo Pepi in the winter transfer window. So we'll see who exactly, which team is he going to join, and we're really at the point where it's not if Ricardo Pepi is going to leave FC Dallas, but more like when exactly that is going to the case and which team he's going to go. But other than that, for Dallas, I guess maybe in this game they can play a little spoiler over the Galaxy, who, after finally ending that free fall that they went, where they had a stretch where they, I think, went 9 or 10 games without a win. I think it was a 9-game winless run. Now with back-to-back wins, certainly the confidence is back into this team, and just in time for them to potentially make not only a playoff push, but also trying to get that fourth position away from the Portland Timbers. As I mentioned, with the Timbers opening that door, and the Galaxy are only 1 point from trying to get that fourth position, they can have a chance to still get home field advantage. And, in some way, I think they will hope that they can get home field advantage, because this is a team that's been in that third position throughout the entire season. And that they do not get home field advantage and slide down maybe in the 5th or 6th position and ends up being a fringe playoff team, it will be definitely considered disappointing, considering, as I said, they spend most of their time near the top part of the Western Conference table. But that being said, now moving on into the last game on this board. And of course is the San Jose Earthquakes versus the Vancouver Whitecaps, in a game where the Quakes It's another must-win for them. And in many ways, this is almost like another elimination game for the Quakes because there is no doubt that if they do not beat the Whitecaps in this game, I mean, even a draw in this game will probably they put any last hope that the Quakes had in terms of making the playoffs because they're 7 points back with four games to go, and this is an opportunity playing against a team that is the last team in the playoffs, and also the Quakes, besides getting a win in this game against the Whitecaps, they're going to be definitely rooting for a lot of teams around them to lose to, so that they can get themselves into the playoff position. But coming into this game, it's a 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific start, just like the last game. The Quakes have a 9-9-12 record, while Vancouver has an 11-10-9 record. The Quakes, of course, won 4-0 against Austin at home, while Vancouver, they're coming off of a 3-2 win against the Portland Timbers on the road. And despite the fact that, I said this is a must-win for the Quakes, it's not going to be easy whatsoever, because you can definitely tell from that this Whitecaps team, as I said in the review, this team is determined to make the playoffs. And the way that they've been playing these last couple of games, you can see that they definitely want to make the playoffs. And when they do make it to the playoffs, I even said that they could be a dark horse heading into the playoffs out of the Western Conference, because they are just playing with so much confidence right now. And that last game against the Timbers, getting a huge comeback win, just boosted their confidence even more than before that they had. So yeah, there's no doubt this is a big game for the Quakes, and as enjoyable as the game between the Quakes and Austin in that one where they comfortably win, this is a different type of team. And I guess maybe the other reason why maybe I'm a little bit confident that the fact that the Quakes are able to get a win against Vancouver is that I'm not attending that game. And again, you know the rules. If I'm not attending that game, most likely the Quakes are going to win, and we'll see if that truth is going to hold. And for once, I really hope that truth does hold, because again, if this team does not get a win tonight, you might as well just kiss their playoff chances goodbye for this season. But there you have it. That is pretty much it for the review of all 11 of the Saturday game. As I mentioned, tomorrow I'll do a very short preview of the Sunday game, where we have 2 Sunday games that is going to be happening. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys hit a like, smash the subscribe button. Let me know in the comments below what do you think about these 11 games and your prediction for all 11 of these games. And yeah, hope you guys enjoy this video, and I will see you guys next time.